Welcome to the debate. Our focus today is on one of the most, well, intellectually disruptive ideas of the last few decades, the reported link between human consciousness and molecular structure. Specifically, we're diving into the controversial and, frankly, compelling research pioneered by Masaru Emoto concerning the influence of thought on water.
That's right. Emoto's original claims, that water exposed to positive words and intentions produces these aesthetically beautiful organized ice crystals, while negative intentions result in chaotic, unformed structures. They really force us to confront what water actually is and maybe what consciousness is capable of.
Absolutely. So the central question we're tackling is fundamental. Does this phenomenon represent verifiable evidence of a universal consciousness mechanism, perhaps rooted in quantum biology? Or should we instead prioritize the immediate, verifiable psychophysiological benefits that humans get from simply observing the highly aesthetic structures that result? I'll be arguing for the reality of this emotional imprinting as a key aspect of a new quantum worldview, suggesting water acts as a kind of mirror for human intention. It's truly revolutionary stuff.
And I come at it from a slightly different angle. While acknowledging the intrigue and the radical implications, I'll be exploring the nuances of the data. I plan to focus primarily on the critical issues of methodological integrity, which, let's be honest, plagued the early experiments, and argue that the most robust and measurable benefits are actually derived from the visual experience itself. This leads to a more grounded, perhaps aesthetically driven interpretation.
Okay. Well, from my perspective, the reported effects that positive intentionality generates highly organized fractal-like crystals, and that this same positive input shifts biological processes, like causing rice and water systems to ferment rather than decompose. These are not minor anomalies. They seem to be real, reproducible phenomena that fundamentally challenge the old materialistic boundaries of science. This ability of water to hold emotional memory, as Emoto posited, it signals a profound shift in how we understand reality itself. If we're going to take these effects seriously, we have to introduce a mechanism that can bridge non-physical consciousness and physical molecular structure. And I believe this mechanism is rooted in quantum physics, specifically via the magnetic body, or MB. Think of the magnetic body as an intelligent, large-scale field structure associated with all living things. It's the template, the connection point for consciousness.
Okay.
The MB of the subject person and the water sample, they become linked via flux tube connections. Now, these connections create a larger, unified, conscious entity where intention can be physically transferred. And importantly, this influence is expressed universally at the DNA level through what we call bioharmony. This is defined by specific 3 chords of dark photons or sound. These act as universal correlates for emotional states, and they directly affect the structure of water when it's in a state of quantum criticality, a state where water is maximally sensitive to input. This isn't just, abstract theory. It's a compelling conceptual leap that could finally unite mind and matter within a unified physics framework. It's incredibly exciting.
That conceptual scale is certainly vast, I'll grant you that. But I must inject a necessary note of caution regarding the evidence itself. The claims of emotional imprinting are captivating, absolutely, but they are built upon initial experiments that face significant and often quite violent criticism from the scientific community. This was largely due to a pervasive lack of rigorous controls, particularly double-blind procedures, which has made genuine objective replication extraordinarily difficult over the years.
But difficulties don't negate the positive findings.
Right. And I agree, we cannot simply dismiss all the evidence out of hand. Even critics have to acknowledge that there have been attempts at careful, rigorous testing. For instance, there was that well-publicized double-blind study where water samples treated with distant positive intention produced crystals that independent judges scored as significantly higher in aesthetic appeal compared to controls. And this, for me, brings us back to what is verifiable. The aesthetic structures themselves. That's where we find robust, measurable data. The beautiful crystals exhibit quantifiable fractal patterns. So, I propose that the true immediate benefit stems not solely from some esoteric, perhaps currently unprovable quantum mechanism, but from the human brain's demonstrable physiological resonance with these naturally occurring fractal patterns. There's a phenomenon known as fractal fluency.
The brain is essentially hardwired to process these patterns optimally, and this processing measurably reduces stress. That's a tangible, verifiable benefit right there.
I appreciate you mentioning the double-blind study, actually, because that outcome, the enhanced aesthetic appeal from remote intention, is precisely what the magnetic body model predicts. The mechanism, though complex, yes, is necessary to explain why intention works at a distance. If we truly want to understand the implication of these findings, we have to ask the fundamental question: how can the influence of thoughts on water be explained at a fundamental level? We have to go entirely beyond classical chemistry, which just assumes water is, H2O molecules randomly bouncing around. Classical models fail because they cannot account for remote intention or the sustained structural changes we see. The influence we observe, whether it's crystal formation or that metabolic shift in rice, it requires the quantum properties of water to be active, specifically the existence of water's dark component at a state of quantum criticality.
Dark component. Okay.
Yes, this state maximizes water's sensitivity to intention, and it's analogous to the Pollock effect, where water forms negatively charged exclusion zones, or EZs. These EZs create structured water layers, which, in our framework, support dark proton sequences along those quantum flux tubes. This structure allows the intentional signal, the emotional blueprint, to be physically imprinted onto the water. It's a coherent picture.
I understand the appeal, honestly, of a unified theoretical framework that ties physics to consciousness. But let's return to what we can actually measure and test right now. I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the MB model is the only possible explanation, or even a testable one at this stage. The history of parapsychological research, well, it shows that complex phenomena involving living systems are always vulnerable to the experimenter effect. The researcher's desire for a positive result can unintentionally affect the outcome. Now, while you might argue the MB explains this too, introducing terms like dark component, flux tubes, and bioharmony, these are concepts that are not currently verifiable or falsifiable through conventional means. It makes the theory itself kind of immune to challenge, doesn't it? We risk substituting one mystery, the effect of intention, with a set of even deeper, currently untestable theoretical constructs.
But the experimenter effect is the influence we're talking about. That very effect is what my model is trying to explain at a fundamental level. The influence is the point, and its mechanism is what we must define. So we have to ask further about the core mechanism. What are the key elements for the influence of thoughts on water? It starts with the concept of bioharmony, this universal language of emotion. This isn't random. It's realized through the genetic code via an underlying geometric structure, icosahedral tessellations. This geometry, combined with the three chords of light or sound, acts as the universal blueprint for emotional states. It dictates whether the emotional tone impressed upon the water system is high or low in negentropy, meaning order. When we apply friendly words, we increase the system's negentropy, organizing the structure, initiating metabolic life. That's why the rice ferments. Unfriendly words force a disharmony, a less negotopic state, leading to decomposition. This is a direct physical correlation between a universal emotional language and the structure of matter. It's profound.
Conceptually vast, yes, but let's look at the operational requirements here. Are we truly measuring a universal quantum effect on molecular structure, or are we seeing the profound impact of human intentionality on a system, water, that is fundamentally designed to respond to subtle input, regardless of whether that input is transmitted via a magnetic body or some other means? We must ask pointedly about the influence of thoughts on water. How much of this is necessary physics, as you describe it, and how much is simply the inherent complexity of consciousness interacting with highly responsive water clusters? Maybe the mechanism is simpler, or at least different than proposed.
It is entirely the mechanism of conscious interaction. and its efficacy is absolutely dependent on the conscious state of the person acting as the sender. This is crucial. We must clearly establish that the influence of thoughts on water requires a healthy amount of positive attitude to facilitate best results. The resonance you see requires a matching emotional tone between the subject and the water system to facilitate the transmission of that high negotropy signal. Moreover, the process requires focus to maintain the necessary quantum coherence. This is why the influence of thoughts on water requires consistent positive energy to be active and healthy. This consistency allows for sustained quantum coherence, mediated by the magnetic body. If the intention is fleeting or weak, well, the resulting crystal structure will be equally fragmented. This also means that the influence of thoughts on water requires the ability to have periods of calm, thoughtful focus to be at maximum productive health. This focused discipline allows the intentional signal to be coherently transmitted, generating the beautiful, complex, and organized fractal structures that, yes, you admire. The quality of the outcome is directly linked to the quality of the conscious input.
Okay, I see the logic you're building, but I'm still not fully convinced by that line of reasoning. Primarily because the beneficial outcome is already validated through the aesthetic experience. And that experience bypasses the need for, well, currently unfalsifiable quantum mechanics. Whether or not the complex MB mechanism is provable right now, the fact remains that positive intention tends to produce highly ordered, aesthetically pleasing fractal patterns. And this isn't just about pretty pictures. I want to expand on the findings of physicist Richard Taylor. He specifically studied the visual effect of fractal patterns. His work demonstrated that viewing these patterns triggers a physiological resonance that can result in a measurable stress reduction of 60% in human subjects. A 60% reduction.
Which is significant, I agree, but...
Right. And why? Because the human visual system, particularly the visual cortex, seems to have evolved to process fractal patterns found everywhere in nature, coastlines, clouds, snowflakes, with maximal efficiency and minimal energy expenditure. This efficient, harmonious processing is what's called fractal fluency. Therefore, the beautifully organized crystal patterns resulting from positive intention provide an immediate, measurable aesthetic mechanism that directly translates to verifiable human physiological well-being, irrespective of whether dark photons or flux tubes were involved in their creation. The immediate, provable benefit comes from seeing the order, not necessarily from needing to fully accept how the order was created quantum mechanically.
While I absolutely recognize the power of the aesthetic response, it's undeniable that response is merely the human recognition of the coherence already imprinted by the consciousness mechanism. The beautiful crystals and the living fermentation aren't just byproducts. They are reflections of a coherent, healthy consciousness. And the influence works both ways. The profound result on human experience and our environment is this. We see that exposure to healthy influence of thoughts on water improves your social mood and mental ability to share ideas and thoughts. The act of positive intention doesn't just benefit the water, it creates higher conscious coherence in the sender and the broader system. The MB model actually requires this reciprocal relationship. The order created in the water is, in a way, a template for the order we strive for in our own minds and society.
Okay, we certainly seem to agree that the relationship between intention and the physical environment, particularly water, yields outcomes we associate with health and order, whether that manifests as fermentation in biological systems or through the, yes, mesmerizing organization of crystal structures. However, the precise definition of the operative mechanism, well, that remains a powerful divergence, doesn't it? Is the complexity truly rooted in a hierarchy of dark matter, quantum criticality, and bioharmony, or does the explanation reside more simply, perhaps, in the innate, evolutionary human physiological response to observable, beautiful fractal aesthetics?
When applied with focus and consistency, does generate organized, beautiful structures. This, to me, points strongly toward a unified framework where the emotional state is fundamentally linked to universal geometric principles. The very existence of those beneficial fractal structures suggests that the influence of thoughts on water is indeed a real, universal quantum phenomenon, ready to be explored as perhaps the key to a more conscious world.
And one whose demonstrated aesthetic impact provides an immediate, measurable 60% reduction in stress, proving that the benefit is tangible regardless of whether the underlying physics is fully confirmed today or remains, for now, theoretical.
Absolutely. The evidence, whether viewed through a quantum lens that dictates universal consciousness or an aesthetic one that measures physiological stress response, it highlights the compelling power of focused intention. And I think it underscores the urgent need for rigorous, open-minded study of consciousness and its profound role in shaping our physical reality. There's clearly much more to uncover here.